This is my presentation on a feminist critique and course reflection. It's by me, Jonathan Cohen. In the 1920s, feminism was changing from the suffragist movements of the past, and the feminists of this period were no longer interested in reform, but more interested in enjoying their newfound freedom. Like these women who, because of their short skirts or dresses, were known as flappers because their dresses flapped in the wind. Because of mass media, this period showed feminism a new prosperity and openness towards the world. And for the first time, women were able to demonstrate their sexuality in public. Following World War II, women lost their valuable jobs to veterans returning from war, and this regressed them back to being the family caretaker, and it sort of set the feminist movement backwards. But because there were still feminists in this period, the ones who had gone to work felt more comfortable in work than they did being at home. So they fought to try and get their jobs back. And once they were tossed aside, they were set apart from the white male community. And because of this, they saw their predicament similar to that of African American segregation. From then on, feminists marched for the civil rights movements, and later against the Vietnam War, which brought about more gender issues as they protested. In the 21st century, there were laws written to forcefully make men and women equal, but even though these laws were in place, like Title IX and other laws, the women's feminists did not have legal grounds anymore to protest because they were given the laws, and legally they were seen as equals, but they actually weren't. So to change their motives, they started standing up against and raising awareness of prostitution, pornography, sex trafficking, and AIDS. And their slogan was "My body, my mind, and my choice," which they didn't want to be raped. They didn't want to be exploited for sexual activities, for money or other things. In my opinion, feminism is not a movement but a way of life. You can't, nowadays your job isn't to be a feminist. If you're a feminist, you believe that everyone should be equal. And the feminists now don't have to be only women. They just have to be someone who wants equality for everyone. And I believe the name feminism is not the correct word to be used anymore because it gives negative connotations in our society. So instead they should be called equalism, because it's equal for everyone, not just women and one race. Myself, I'm not a feminist, but I'm a pro-feminist. I believe that everyone deserves to be treated the same, no matter what race they are, sexual orientation, or gender. I believe that women can do exactly what men can do, if not better, in some cases. And I also believe that men shouldn't be paid more than women for the same job, because it's the same job. And it's also my belief that the exploitation of women's sexuality has gone too far, and the female figures used at diners like Hooters has gone so far to use the bodies of the waitresses to try and get men to go to it. And I'm not complaining, but I've never seen a restaurant with male waitresses that dress in skimpy clothing to attract women customers. For my feminist critique, I did football, and football is a male sport, but it's not that reason because women can't play, it's because they're discouraged to play. Like in the NFL, women can play football, but a lot of times they're discouraged not to try and go into the draft or go into college football because of many reasons. First of all, the jargon or vocabulary is said to be too confusing for a woman to understand. And for that reason, people think that they shouldn't play because they won't be able to understand it. This isn't true. Plays like this one, this is a simple pass play, and the pass routes are pretty much common sense. The one way on the left is called a post. That's where the receiver runs to the field goal post. And the one on the right is called an out. It's where they run out. There's many other very obvious jargon used. Another reason is because football is a very violent sport, and because of its violence, people have died. And one statistic I read was that more people die every year from childbirth than from football accidents. And as far as I know, only women can give birth. So. When you think of a football player, you probably think of a big, muscular, tone athlete like Clay Matthews. But what you don't think of is a female football player. And you would say that this is the stereotypical person that you think of who plays football, right? No. Professional football for women looks more like this. This football is called the Lingerie Football League, the LFL. It's an actual organization that comprises of 12 different teams, and they play a regular season, and they're very, I can't think of a word. Anyway, they're very enthusiastic about the game, but because they're dressed in skimpy clothing, it's still seen as a joke. Like with the picture of Clay Matthews, you saw him in full pants, pads that go on his thighs, knees, hips, and tailbone, and he also wears a cup, but you don't see any of that on these girls. Also, the shoulder pads go down below the ribs on a football player, whereas these stop at the neck to show the cleavage. And the helmets, also in regular football, they cover the entire head, whereas these are basically glorified skateboarding helmets. And the motto for the LFL is true fantasy football, which in itself shows that it's basically for men's entertainment. For my course reflection, the 5 themes of this class that I discovered. The first one was the history of women in STEM. First, we watched that movie Iron Jawed Angels, and I learned a lot about the suffrage of women and what women had to go through throughout history to get where they are now. I also learned about the implicit bias we all have and how our hidden biases reflect everything we do in our daily lives, and all of these biases are unconscious. I also learned that the importance of being a role model through our volunteer service and our hands-on activities, and the scholarly article I read was that the encouragement from high school counselors or family can actually help a woman get into a STEM field. We also learned in this class about feminism and how a lot of people did their scholarly article on feminism, and I learned a lot about what it means to be a feminist in this class, and I'm actually surprised at how much of information I learned about it. I also learned another theme in this class was tolerance and respect. Through learning this information about what women had to go through and what experiences they have gone through, I have learned a great new respect for women and other races in general. And this class actually will help me because I learned a lot about diversity, and it's going to help me in my career later on. So that's about it.